He was just a child when he wore the crown of the mightiest kingdom on earth. His reign was brief, his death shrouded in mystery. Yet, what lay hidden beneath the desert sands for over 3,000 years would one day astonish the world and grant him immortality. This is the story of a pharaoh, ancient secrets, forgotten tombs, and the eternal magic of discovery. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's somewhat comforting to think of all of us scattered across the globe, quietly unwinding together. So breathe deeply, settle in, and let the sands of ancient Egypt drift softly through your imagination. In the quiet of night, beneath stars that once shimmered above the Valley of the Kings, the whispers of a lost world await. Let's begin. The desert air is cool in the early morning, and a faint golden light brushes the horizon. Across the plains of Akhetaten, today known as Amarna, the sun slowly peaks above the eastern cliffs, just as it did in the days of the boy who would one day be king. The city hums with the soft stirrings of daily life. Clay ovens being stoked, sandals padding across stone courtyards, the gentle rustle of linen as servants begin their duties. And in the heart of this once glorious city, a child is born into the house of Pharaoh. Tutankhamun, as he was first named, entered the world during one of Egypt's most turbulent and extraordinary eras. His name, meaning living image of Aten, was a reflection of the radical religious shift led by his presumed father, Akhenaten. This pharaoh had cast aside the many gods of old, focusing worship solely on Aten, the sun disk, and uprooting centuries of tradition. He had moved the capital away from the powerful priesthoods of Thebes, building an entirely new city in honor of Aten. It was here, among the strange symmetry of open-air temples and sunlight-drenched courtyards, that the young prince took his first breaths. Little is certain about Tutankhamun's early life. The ancient records are fragmented, and many were later erased or deliberately obscured by successors seeking to restore Egypt's traditional beliefs. Yet among the silence, whispers remain. He was likely born around 1341 BC, possibly to one of Akhenaten's lesser wives, perhaps the mysterious Kia, or even to his own sister, following royal customs that kept power within the bloodline. In a palace of incense and ceremony, surrounded by murals of celestial light and divine family trees, the boy was raised in a world shaped by upheaval. He would have learned to walk under the gaze of colossal statues, their elongated faces carved in the stylized Amarna art style, so different from the stately realism of earlier dynasties. His earliest memories might have been filled with hymns to Aten, not Amun or Osiris. The corridors of his childhood were lined with the soft footfalls of courtly life, with nurses, scribes, priests, and foreign envoys weaving their way through the palace halls. But for all the splendor, the royal household was shadowed by uncertainty. Akhenaten's religious revolution had made enemies among Egypt's traditional elite. Trade routes faltered, old alliances weakened. Temples across the land were abandoned, their gods desecrated or forgotten. And while Akhenaten's city basked in sunlight, the rest of Egypt murmured in discontent. Tutankhamun's education, like all royal children, would have been rigorous. Tutors would have taught him to read hieroglyphs, recite hymns, and learn diplomacy, strategy, and statecraft. He may have studied history carved in temple walls, ironic perhaps, given how little of his own childhood would be preserved. He was likely a quiet, thoughtful child, more delicate than most, and perhaps already suffering from the ailments that would later follow him into adulthood. One can imagine him wandering the palace gardens, where lotus flowers floated in still pools and date palms swayed softly in the breeze. Perhaps he looked to the sky and dreamed not of power, but of peace, of restoring balance to a kingdom that felt it had drifted too far from its roots. Yet childhood in the royal court was brief. The palace, once vibrant with the songs of Aten, would soon fall quiet. By the time Tutankhamun was just a boy of 8 or 9, his father had vanished, whether dead or disgraced, and the golden city of Akhetaten began to crumble. As the sun sets once more on the Nile's horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, we leave the boy king at a crossroads. He does not yet know the weight of the crown that awaits him, nor the role he will play in healing the wounds of his forebears. But beneath the stars of ancient Egypt, his journey is about to begin. The air is still, heavy with the scent of myrrh and desert stone. Somewhere beyond the hills, the Nile glides silently beneath a canopy of starlight. In the halls of power, torches flicker against limestone walls, casting dancing shadows as ancient rituals stir to life once more. In this twilight of dynasties, a young boy is led toward a throne older than memory. His small frame is cloaked in gold-threaded linen, his eyes wide with the weight of a nation. The child is only 9 years old, and he is now pharaoh. With the death or disappearance of Akhenaten and the brief shadowed reigns of successors like Smenkhare or possibly Neferneferuaten, Egypt found itself in need of both stability and legitimacy. And so it turned to the bloodline of kings, to a boy named Tutankhamun. Though still just a child, he was of royal descent and could unite the fractured house of Egypt. Behind the scenes, powerful advisors, most notably A and the general Horemheb, maneuvered carefully to support his elevation. They would guide the kingdom, but it would be the boy's face carved into the cartouches, the boy's name recorded on stone. The coronation took place in Thebes, under the watchful eyes of priests, nobles, and the gods themselves. From early morning, ceremonial chants echoed across the courtyards, rising with the sun. Offerings were made, incense burned, and sacred rites performed with timeless precision. At the heart of the spectacle stood Tutankhamun, adorned with the blue and gold Nemes crown, the crook and flail of divine kingship held delicately in his hands. Before all of Egypt, the child was reborn, not just as ruler, but as a living god. In this moment, his name changed. No longer Tutankhaten, the living image of Aten, but Tutankhamun, the living image of Amun. It was a signal to the world that the heretical chapter of Atenism was closing. The gods of old were returning. Amun, the hidden one, long neglected during Akhenaten's reign, would once more take his place at the center of Egyptian worship. The new pharaoh's name was more than a title. It was a symbol of restoration. But behind the golden fanfare and sacred oaths lay the quiet, hidden reality of power. At 9, Tutankhamun could not govern a vast and troubled empire alone. Instead, his court became a delicate dance between regents and advisors, men like I, experienced and shrewd, who likely served as vizier, and Horemheb, the commander of the army, who maintained order and strength. These elder statesmen would shape policy, restore temples, and navigate the diplomacy required to hold Egypt together, all in the young pharaoh's name. Yet Tutankhamun was not merely a puppet. Even at a young age, he would have participated in rituals, read official reports, and received constant instruction. He sat on the lap of power and absorbed its lessons daily. His image appeared on temple walls, his cartouche etched into stone, his voice, though small, heard in courtly audiences. He was Pharaoh, after all, the earthly form of Horus, the chosen of Ma'at, and the bridge between gods and mortals. In the days following his coronation, grand proclamations were made to the people. The temples of Amun, Mut, and Khonsu reopened. Statues long hidden were rededicated. Offerings flowed once more to the gods of Thebes. For many Egyptians, this marked a return to cosmic order, to the balance they called Ma'at, a divine rightness that held the universe in harmony. The people rejoiced, for it seemed the gods were smiling again. And through it all, young Tutankhamun grew into his role. He sat through long ceremonies beneath the gaze of falcon-headed deities, listened as priests whispered ancient litanies, and walked among papyrus reeds beside sacred lakes. He would have looked up at towering obelisks and begun to understand that his name too might one day be carved into eternity. As dusk falls once more upon the city of Thebes, the temple columns seem to glow with the last light of the sun. A boy king walks beneath them, dwarfed by their majesty, yet embraced by their legacy. He is no longer a child of Amarna, born in the shadows of controversy. He is now Tutankhamun, pharaoh of the two lands, son of Ra, chosen by the gods. And though the years ahead will be few, they will echo through time like the ringing of sacred bronze. The sun rises gently over Thebes, casting a warm, golden hue across the courtyards of the palace. Palm fronds rustle softly in the breeze, and the scent of fresh papyrus mingles with wafts of honeyed bread and morning incense. Within the painted walls of the royal residence, life stirs quietly. Servants tread softly on polished stone. Scribes prepare their scrolls, and the court prepares for another day under the watchful eyes of the gods. In the heart of it all, a young king begins his morning, surrounded by symbols of divinity and duty. Though still only a child, Tutankhamun's role was one of immense visibility. Each day brought ritual, ceremony, and the subtle complexities of royal life. He would have sat on a throne carved with sacred symbols, receiving emissaries, reviewing offerings, and participating in festivals that reaffirmed his connection to the divine. The palace itself was a world of colour and sound, a tapestry of music, protocol, and whispered counsel. But beneath the rhythmic routines of courtly life, something deeper was stirring, a quiet but determined effort to rebuild what had been lost. The reforms that began during his ascension continued to unfold, guided largely by the experienced hands of Heir and Horemheb. Temples that had been stripped during Akhenaten's monotheistic revolution were restored with new statues, altars, and inscriptions. The priests of Amun, once silenced, regained their influence. Old hymns once again echoed through temple halls, and the sacred rituals of the afterlife were reintroduced. Tutankhamun's court issued the Restoration Stela, a proclamation engraved in stone to announce a return to balance and tradition. It declared that the temples had fallen into neglect, the gods had turned away, and that under the young pharaoh's rule, divine order had been re-established. Though its words were likely penned by his advisors, it bore the mark of Tutankhamun's reign, a symbolic gesture of healing for a fractured kingdom. Amid these reforms, everyday life at court carried on with both splendor and subtle tension. Diplomats from distant lands brought gifts and messages. Artisans worked tirelessly in palace workshops, crafting jewelry, ceremonial items, and intricate furniture, all befitting a divine ruler. Royal scribes maintained meticulous records, from grain distribution to religious rites. And while the boy king played his ceremonial role, the real reins of governance remained in experienced hands, though not without quiet rivalries simmering beneath the surface. Education was a constant presence in the young pharaoh's life. His days were filled with instruction in history, theology, language, and politics. He learned to read and write hieroglyphs, interpret omens, and understand the delicate hierarchies of the court. He was taught the importance of Ma'at, not just as a spiritual concept, but as a guiding principle for leadership. Justice, truth, and balance were the ideals by which he was to rule. The art and architecture of the period began to evolve as well. While traces of the Amarna style remained, its elegant naturalistic forms, the influence of older traditions returned. Statues once again depicted pharaohs in idealized form, muscular and timeless. Reliefs portrayed not just the king and Aten, but the full pantheon of gods. A new visual language was taking shape, one that sought to blend innovation with reverence for the past. Within the palace walls, Tutankhamun grew taller, more aware of his place in history. He was no longer just the symbol of restoration. He was a boy slowly becoming a man, caught between the weight of his lineage and the fragility of his body. Behind the scenes, whispers of his health, his limp, his ailments were softened by protocol, but felt by those closest to him. Still, he carried himself with the dignity expected of a king, adorned in lapis and gold, ever mindful of his divine station. As evening falls upon the great city, the palace windows glow with amber light. Musicians pluck gentle notes on harps as the scent of lotus and cinnamon drifts through the halls. The king reclines on a cedarwood couch, listening as his tutors speak of dynasties past and dreams yet to come. Outside, the Nile glistens beneath a sky of fading violet. Here, in this moment of calm, the young pharaoh finds a measure of peace. Around him, a kingdom slowly heals, its temples rising once more, its gods appeased, its people hopeful. And within him, though his reign will be brief, the echoes of renewal take root. For even a boy king, guided by wiser hands, can plant the seeds of legacy beneath the sands of time. The desert winds carry a whisper through the temple colonnades, as if the gods themselves are murmuring secrets into the twilight. In Thebes, shadows stretch long across sandstone, and the sacred pools reflect the pale shimmer of the evening sky. Within the palace walls, behind veils of incense and hushed counsel, a fragile peace is being tested. The boy king Tutankhamun may sit upon the throne, but beyond the gilded throne room, the empire trembles still. Egypt, once unified under the divine rule of generations past, had been fractured by Akhenaten's religious revolution. The traditional priesthoods had been undermined, the cult of Amun nearly extinguished, and foreign alliances neglected. The rise of Aten had not only changed temples and rituals, it had severed trust, weakened diplomacy, and left a power vacuum that could not be ignored. Though the return to the worship of Amun had begun, it was no easy path. The priesthood needed time to rebuild its institutions, reclaim its wealth, and reassert its place at the heart of governance. Cities like Thebes and Memphis began to flourish once more, but resentment lingered in the outer provinces. Local officials, once loyal to the old faiths, now demanded recognition, compensation, and order. These were delicate negotiations, carried out not by the boy pharaoh himself, but by the seasoned hands of Ai and Horemheb. Ai, the elderly vizier, served as the kingdom's political anchor. A master of diplomacy and courtly etiquette, he soothed tensions with carefully worded decrees and offerings of favor. His long experience under multiple reigns gave him the wisdom to steer the court through turbulent tides. Horemheb, on the other hand, brought the strength of the military. As general of the army, he held sway over Egypt's defense and used his command to restore discipline among regional garrisons and rebellious outposts. Together, these two elder statesmen orchestrated the restoration of Egypt's stability, but not without ambition. Each man harbored hopes of succession, watching and waiting as Tutankhamun matured. The corridors of power were not empty of rivalry, and while outwardly loyal to the young king, Ai and Horemheb quietly prepared for a future in which one of them might wear the crown. Foreign relations, too, required urgent repair. During the Amarna period, Egypt's influence abroad had weakened. Vassal states in Canaan and Syria had grown restless, and rivals such as the Hittites expanded their territories with increasing confidence. Letters and envoys began to flow once more through the halls of diplomacy, as Egypt sought to re-establish its position on the world stage. Tribute resumed from distant lands. Treaties were renegotiated. Even as a child, Tutankhamun's image was invoked in correspondence, his name a symbol of continuity and rebirth. Meanwhile, within Egypt's borders, decrees were issued in his name to repair the spiritual foundations of the kingdom. Temples were rebuilt with sacred precision, their walls filled with scenes of divine communion. Statues of the gods, once defaced or discarded, were restored and rededicated. The scribes carefully replaced the names of Amun on old stelae, and festivals once banned were celebrated anew in joyous procession. Tutankhamun, though young and often guided by others, was not absent from these affairs. He presided over religious ceremonies, rode in chariots through festival crowds, and appeared at the side of his advisors in public addresses. His physical presence, cloaked in gold, adorned with ceremonial regalia, reassured the people. They did not need to see power wielded from his hand. It was enough to see him glowing with the approval of the gods. Yet behind palace doors, the king's health cast a long, quiet shadow. Injuries and inherited disorders burdened his fragile body, making travel difficult and causing fatigue that slowed his duties. He bore it with grace, but the strain showed in his careful steps, his guarded expression, the quiet moments when the royal physician was called to his side. Still, reforms continued. The balance of Ma'at, so disrupted during his father's reign, was being carefully rethreaded into the fabric of daily life. And through it all, Tutankhamun grew into his title, fulfilling his sacred role not as a warrior king, but as a healer of the nation's soul. As night descends once more upon the land of the Nile, the temples glow softly in the distance. The scent of jasmine floats through the palace courtyards. Somewhere, beneath a sky rich with stars, the boy pharaoh dreams not of conquest, but of harmony. His reign, though short, is becoming one of quiet restoration, a balm upon old wounds, and a whisper of hope for generations to come. The soft glow of dawn spills across the royal gardens, bathing the lotus ponds and palm-lined courtyards in golden warmth. Birds flutter among the reeds, their songs delicate as silk. Within the inner sanctum of the palace, the fragrance of blue water lilies mingles with the scent of sandalwood incense. Here, in this secluded world of cushions, columns, and carved stone, the young pharaoh lives not only as a ruler, but as a husband. For beside Tutankhamun, a queen walks, a girl not much older than himself, yet bound to him by blood, tradition, and duty. Her name is Ankhesenamun. She is his half-sister, the daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, and she has known the boy Tutankhamun for as long as either of them can remember. Together, they were children of a strange, turbulent time. Together, they witnessed the decline of Amarna, the fall of their father's religious empire, and the slow rebuilding of Egypt's ancient faith. Now, together, they bear the burden of royal expectation to continue the sacred bloodline of kings. Their union is more than personal. It is political, spiritual, and symbolic. Royal marriages in ancient Egypt often followed close familial lines, seen not as taboo, but as a means of preserving divine lineage. As consort to the pharaoh, Ankhesenamun becomes more than a queen. She is a priestess, a partner in ritual, and a living embodiment of Ma'at beside her husband. In temple reliefs, she appears beside Tutankhamun in scenes of offering and worship, her hand resting gently in his, her face serene, her role essential. In the golden halls of the palace, their marriage unfolds amid courtly rhythms. They dine beneath painted ceilings that shimmer like the heavens, their meals served on gilded platters, their laughter soft beneath the music of harp and flute. It is easy to imagine moments of true affection between them, two young souls, bound not just by law, but by shared memory, by the strange intimacy of surviving a dynasty's collapse. In public, they are serene. In private, perhaps more vulnerable, dreaming of a future with children who might restore their house and secure Egypt's fate. And yet, that hope would prove heartbreakingly fragile. The mummified remains of two infant girls were later discovered in Tutankhamun's tomb, his stillborn daughters, each carefully wrapped, placed with ritual care among his treasures. Their presence speaks to the quiet sorrow that lingered within the royal chambers. Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun had tried to produce an heir, but fate did not grant them the legacy they so dearly sought. The reasons remain uncertain. Modern examinations suggest that Tutankhamun suffered from a range of physical conditions, genetic disorders, a weakened immune system, perhaps a congenital deformity, or inherited fragility stemming from generations of close royal intermarriage. Ankhesenamun, too, may have borne the weight of those inherited complexities. Whatever the cause, the palace that once echoed with dreams of future kings grew quieter with each passing year. Yet despite these sorrows, the royal couple remained at the heart of Egypt's spiritual and ceremonial life. They presided together over festivals, offered prayers in the temples, and made appearances that reassured the people that divine order had returned. Their presence was a comfort to a nation still healing from the past. Side by side, they embodied renewal, two radiant figures amid a backdrop of transition. Ankhesenamun, though often overshadowed in the grand arc of history, deserves remembrance. Her name, meaning she lives through Amun, echoes the very spirit of the restoration. She had once been a daughter of Aten, like her husband, and yet she too adapted, re-embraced the old gods, and lent her voice to the rebuilding of a shattered spiritual landscape. Her strength, though quiet, was profound. As evening falls once more over the palace, the wind stirs gently through linen curtains, and torches flicker along carved columns. Somewhere within the royal quarters, the pharaoh and his queen sit together in silence, perhaps gazing out over the gardens or listening to the far-off hymns drifting from a nearby temple. Theirs is a bond of both love and loss, one sealed by youth, shaped by destiny, and softened by the shared burden of longing. Though no heir would rise from their union, their story lingers, etched not only in tomb paintings and artifacts, but in the very fabric of ancient memory. In a world ruled by gods and kings, even the most fleeting of lives can echo through eternity. The air over Thebes is unusually still, as if the winds themselves are holding their breath. In the palace, courtiers speak in whispers. Servants move softly through corridors, lit by the amber glow of oil lamps. The scent of frankincense lingers in the halls, mingling with the sharp, unmistakable hush of worry. In the innermost chamber, the pharaoh lies cloaked in linen, his brow damp, his breathing shallow. He is barely into his 19th year, and the end is near. Tutankhamun's death came suddenly, at least to the world outside. But the quiet signs had been gathering for years. The boy who had once walked the temple steps with measured grace now struggled even to stand unaided. ancient texts are silent on his illness, yet the fragments of his body, uncovered thousands of years later, would whisper what history did not, a life shaped and ultimately shortened by hidden fragilities. Modern examinations of his mummy revealed a constellation of afflictions. He suffered from a cleft palate and a curved spine. His left foot was twisted by congenital deformity, making walking painful without the use of a staff. Dozens of ceremonial walking sticks were found in his tomb, not as symbols of power, but as necessities of life. He may have been plagued by malaria, and some evidence suggests a leg fracture near the time of death, perhaps caused by a fall or accident that became fatally infected. But the precise cause remains uncertain, a blur of illness, injury, and inherited vulnerability. In his final days, the palace must have been steeped in sorrow. The priests would have offered prayers in hushed voices, the physicians mixing poultices from sacred herbs. Ankhesenamun, his queen, likely kept vigil by his side, her heart aching with helplessness. The boy who had once been crowned beneath golden sun rays now lay in shadow, his journey almost complete. Outside, the people of Thebes continued their daily routines, unaware that Egypt's living god was slipping away. The pharaoh was more than a ruler. He was the bridge between the mortal and the divine. His death would shake the cosmic balance, however briefly. Rituals would need to be performed with perfect precision to protect both his soul and the nation itself. When the final breath came, silence must have fallen like a curtain. The palace, usually alive with music, protocol, and motion, would have stilled. Officials wept behind stone walls. The high priests were summoned. The preparations began. Egypt had lost its king, and the gods had gained a new presence in the realm beyond. And yet, his death left more than sorrow. It left uncertainty. Tutankhamun had no surviving heir. He was the last male descendant of the Amarna line. The throne stood vulnerable, and the court braced for what might follow. Power would soon pass into the hands of those who had long circled it, men like Ai and Horemheb, each prepared to shape Egypt's future in the boy king's absence. In keeping with sacred tradition, his mummification began swiftly. The embalmers worked day and night in the necropolis, reciting prayers, anointing the body with oils, and wrapping it in fine linen. But even in death, there was haste. His tomb was not the grand, sprawling complex that other kings had commissioned. It was small, perhaps originally meant for someone of lesser rank, suggesting that his passing had not been anticipated. The artisans had to work quickly. They painted scenes and spells across the chamber walls, crafted shrines and golden coffins, and gathered treasures to accompany him into the afterlife. Despite its size, his burial would become one of the richest in history. As the desert wind begins to stir once more, it carries with it the last breath of a young king. Tutankhamun, the child of Amarna, the restorer of the old gods, is now gone. But his journey is not over. Through ritual and remembrance, he begins the passage into the afterlife, where eternity awaits beyond the western horizon. His story, for the time being, is buried with him, sealed in darkness beneath the sands. But centuries from now, the world will remember. The tomb will open. The boy king will rise again, not in body, but in legacy, in wonder, in gold. The valley lies still beneath a cloak of stars. Silence stretches across the rugged hills, broken only by the whisper of the night wind weaving through ancient stone. Beneath this quiet sky, a procession moves with solemn purpose. Priests in white linen, their heads bowed, torches flickering in the darkness. Somewhere ahead, carried upon sacred poles, is the body of a king. Tutankhamun is coming home to eternity. The Valley of the Kings, hidden amid the arid cliffs west of Thebes, had long been the resting place of pharaohs. For generations, it had guarded the tombs of Egypt's mightiest rulers, kings who sought to hide their graves from the plunder of time and the greed of men. Here, in this desolate cradle of stone, eternity was etched into the earth itself. Now, it would welcome a new soul into its embrace. The tomb prepared for Tutankhamun was small, almost modest, certainly unworthy of a king in grandeur. Its limited scale suggests it was intended for another, perhaps a noble or even a court official. But the boy king's unexpected death left no time for grander plans. In haste and reverence, his burial chamber was transformed into a sacred resting place. Its walls were painted with vibrant scenes of the afterlife. Spells from the Book of the Dead line the surfaces like a protective veil. The gods stood watchful, Anubis guarding the threshold, Osiris welcoming the soul, and Nut, the sky goddess, arching above in divine embrace. The treasures placed inside were breathtaking in both beauty and symbolism. Over 5,000 items were packed into the tight quarters: chariots, thrones, golden statues, ritual instruments, jars of perfume and wine, sandals and walking sticks, jewels and amulets, and clothing fit for eternity. Each object was not merely a possession, but a guide, a key, a companion for the pharaoh's journey into the next world. At the heart of the tomb stood the sarcophagus, a massive quartzite container enclosing 3 nested coffins. The innermost was made of solid gold, and within it lay Tutankhamun's mummified body, adorned with the iconic gold death mask. The mask, radiant and serene, bore the face of a god, idealized, eternal, and majestic. Its eyes, inlaid with obsidian and quartz, gazed not at the tomb walls, but beyond them, into the unseeable realm of Ra and the stars. Priests performed the opening of the mouth ceremony, a ritual that symbolically restored the senses of the deceased, allowing him to eat, speak, see, and hear in the afterlife. Sacred oils were poured. Incantations were whispered. The sarcophagus was sealed. Then the tomb was closed. The rocks of the valley shifted once more, covering the entrance. And for more than 3,000 years, the world outside would forget where the boy king had been laid to rest. Perhaps that too was fate. Unlike the great tombs of his forebears, Tutankhamun's grave was hidden by time and accident. Later structures were built above it. Workmen's huts, rubble, and the drifting sands of millennia all served as quiet guardians. While other tombs were discovered and looted, his remained untouched, as if the gods themselves had placed a veil over its doorway. As the night deepens over the Valley of the Kings, the stars gather overhead like silent witnesses. Somewhere beneath the earth, the boy king sleeps, surrounded by golden spells and silence. He does not know that one day the world will knock gently on the door of his forgotten tomb and open it to a kind of immortality no pharaoh could have imagined. The year is 1922. The sun hangs high above the scorched cliffs of the Theban hills, casting long, sharp shadows across the dust-choked Valley of the Kings. In the stillness, the rhythm of pickaxes tapping against ancient stone breaks the silence, soft, steady, determined. Among the sand and rock, a man stands with notebook in hand, eyes scanning the earth with a gaze sharpened by decades of tireless work. His name is Howard Carter, and he is on the cusp of a discovery that will change the world. For years, Carter had searched these arid slopes, funded by Lord Carnarvon, driven by an unshakable belief that one final secret lay hidden beneath the sands. Many believed the valley had given up all it had to offer. Dozens of tombs had been uncovered, their riches long since claimed, but Carter remained certain. Somewhere here, the tomb of a forgotten king waited, untouched, unseen, unknown. Then, on a quiet November morning, a young water boy stumbled upon something curious while clearing rubble near the tomb of Ramses VI. It was a step, carved neatly into the rock, leading downwards. Carter's team began to dig, cautiously, methodically, layer by layer, until an entire flight of steps emerged. At the base, a sealed doorway, its plaster marked with the royal cartouche of Tutankhamun. Heart-pounding, Carter paused. He sent a message to Lord Carnarvon, who arrived days later, breathless with anticipation. On the 26th of November, with Carnarvon at his side, Carter made a small breach in the sealed entrance and held up a flickering candle to peer inside. In that moment, history shifted. When asked if he could see anything, Carter whispered, "Yes, wonderful things." Before them lay the antechamber, crowded with treasures layered in dust and silence. Gilded couches shaped like sacred animals, chariots dismantled and stacked, ebony and ivory inlay, alabaster jars, golden statuettes, and exotic fabrics all crammed into the dim tomb-sweet darkness. Nothing had prepared them for this, not the scale, nor the splendor, nor the surreal sense of standing on the edge of an unbroken world more than 3,000 years old. And this was just the beginning. It would take nearly a decade to carefully catalogue, document, and remove the tomb's contents. Each item was examined under Carter's meticulous eye, sketched, numbered, preserved. The process was painstaking, often frustrating, but he refused to rush. This was not merely excavation, it was resurrection. Every jar, every bead, every carved box told a story that had waited millennia to be heard. As the chambers were gradually opened, the annex, the treasury, and finally the burial chamber itself, the full wonder of the discovery unfolded. Inside the golden shrines, nested like a set of sacred dolls, lay the three coffins. The final one, made of solid gold, cradled the mummified remains of the boy king. Upon his face, the mask, iconic, otherworldly, perfect, gazed back with eyes calm and eternal. The world was captivated. News of the discovery spread like wildfire. Newspapers from Cairo to London splashed the story across their pages. Tutankhamun, once a forgotten footnote of Egypt's long history, was now a global sensation. His tomb stirred imaginations, ignited a new wave of Egyptomania, and transformed archaeology forever. Yet, amid the excitement, Carter remained composed. He knew that beneath the spectacle lay something sacred, a message from the ancient world, preserved against all odds. He treated the tomb not as a treasure trove, but as a moment of communion between past and present. Today, the name of Tutankhamun conjures images of gold, mystery, and timeless beauty, but it was Howard Carter's patience, perseverance, and reverence that allowed that name to shine once more. The sands had hidden their secret well. And when the time was right, they let it be found. Now, as the desert wind sweeps softly through the Valley of the Kings, one can almost hear the faint echo of that candlelit whisper, "Yes, wonderful things." The torchlight flickers across golden surfaces, casting ripples of light across objects that have not been touched by human hands in over 3,000 years. The air inside the tomb is still and close, dense with the scent of ancient resin and time itself. The deeper Howard Carter's team explores, the more they find themselves in the presence of something almost otherworldly, a world that had not merely been buried, but sealed in beauty. The treasures of Tutankhamun's tomb are unlike anything the modern world had ever seen. Though his reign was short and his tomb modest in scale, the richness of its contents rivaled the imagination. Each object held within its curves a purpose, a belief, a vision of eternity. Nothing was frivolous. Every artifact was chosen to serve the king in the afterlife, symbols of status, tools of survival, and vessels of sacred meaning. There were weapons and shields, though the boy king was no conqueror. There were ceremonial chariots, their delicate wood gilded and inlaid, meant to carry him through the fields of the afterlife. Furniture filled the chambers, beds shaped like lions and cows, headrests carved with protective spirits, and footstools painted with scenes of conquered enemies, emblems of power, even in death. Perfumed jars still held the hardened remains of fragrant oils. Goblets bore blessings in hieroglyphs. Games for leisure, boxes for jewels, containers for food and drink. Each detail hinted at a life steeped in ritual, wealth, and divine expectation. And among them, the now famous canopic shrine, a golden chest guarding 4 alabaster jars, each cradling the embalmed internal organs of the young king, guarded by the 4 goddesses of protection, Isis, Nephthys, Neith, and Selket. But the most arresting sight of all remained the nested sarcophagi. The outermost, a centune sarcophagus, encased in a series of ever smaller coffins. The final one, made entirely of solid gold, was breathtaking, its weight nearly 110 kilograms. On it lay images of deities embracing the king, inscriptions of protection and rebirth, and precious inlays of lapis lazuli, carnelian, turquoise, and obsidian. And within that golden shell, the face that would capture the world, the funerary mask. Made of gleaming gold and adorned with semi-precious stones, the mask is at once regal and intimate. The cobra and vulture crown rest upon the brow, signifying the protection of Upper and Lower Egypt. The eyes, dark and glassy, stare with timeless calm. It is not just a likeness of Tutankhamun, it is an icon of divine kingship, meant to transform him into Osiris, Lord of the Dead. In life, Tutankhamun was a minor pharaoh, overshadowed by the turmoil of his time, but in death he was reborn, wrapped not just in linen, but in legend. The treasures of his tomb revealed more than splendor. They gave scholars insight into the craftsmanship, beliefs, and daily realities of 18th dynasty Egypt. They illuminated the power of ritual, the artistry of devotion, and the profound importance of preparing for eternity. And still, for all the gold and beauty, there was something even more remarkable: the presence of care. The way sandals were laid beside the bed, the way tiny rings and scarabs were tucked into boxes with deliberate hands, the way 2 small mummified daughters were placed near their father, nestled into his eternal home. These were gestures of love, of mourning, of hope. Today, many of the treasures rest in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, preserved behind glass, yet still glowing with their original radiance. Visitors from across the world gather to peer into their shimmer, feeling a sense of awe that transcends time. And the mask, the most famous object of them all, has become a symbol of mystery, beauty, and the delicate power of the past. As the lights dim in the museum halls and the echoes of footsteps fade, the treasures stand silently once more. Their gold still gleams softly beneath the glass. And somewhere, in the hush of the night, it's as if they're waiting, just as they waited for 3,000 years, to tell their story again. The world has turned many times since that golden tomb was sealed beneath the cliffs of the Valley of the Kings. Empires have risen and fallen, languages have changed, and the rhythms of modern life now echo with the hum of electricity rather than the chants of ancient priests. Yet still, the name of Tutankhamun drifts through time, softly, mysteriously, enduring like a whisper caught on the wind. What began as the burial of a minor pharaoh has become one of the most iconic discoveries in the history of archaeology. The treasures uncovered in 1922 not only dazzled the world with their splendor, but also ignited a deeper fascination, a collective curiosity about who this young king truly was and what his story could teach us about the ancient world. In museums and textbooks, in exhibitions and documentaries, Tutankhamun's image lives on. His golden mask has become a universal symbol of ancient Egypt, familiar even to those who know little of the gods, the dynasties, or the sacred rites of the Nile. His face appears in classrooms, on postage stamps, and in the dreams of those who long to uncover the past. For many, he is the first gateway into the wonder of archaeology, a figure at once human and divine. And yet, his legacy goes beyond the glint of treasure or the beauty of gold. Tutankhamun reminds us of the fragility of history, how easily stories can be lost, and how precious it is when they are found again. His reign may have been short, his achievements few by the standards of empire, but the circumstances of his rediscovery gave him a voice that echoes louder than kings who ruled for decades. Modern science has allowed us to learn more about him than ever imagined. CT scans, DNA analysis, and forensic reconstructions have revealed his ailments, his family lineage, and even the soft contours of his face. We now know that he was a frail young man, shaped by the genetic consequences of royal inbreeding, likely plagued by pain, and yet elevated to divine status in the eyes of his people. His story is also a reflection of how we interact with the past. The way his tomb was excavated, preserved, and displayed sparked global debates about heritage, ownership, and cultural memory. Egypt, proud guardian of its ancient soul, has worked tirelessly to reclaim and preserve its treasures, with the Grand Egyptian Museum soon set to house the complete collection of Tutankhamun's artifacts. Gathered at last in one place, in the land of his birth. But perhaps his most enduring legacy is something quieter, wonder. In a world so often hurried and loud, there is something profoundly comforting in the stillness of his story, the slow, careful work of the archaeologists, the hush of reverence inside the tomb, the patience of centuries, as gold waited beneath the sand. Tutankhamun's legacy is a reminder that history is not just about great conquests or towering monuments. It is also about the moments we pause, listen, and look closely. It is in that pause that Tutankhamun speaks. He tells us of devotion, of beauty, of the delicate thread between life and death. He teaches us that even the briefest of lives can echo across millennia. That mystery is not always meant to be solved, but savored. That somewhere beneath the noise of today, the past still breathes. As the sun sets once more across the Nile, casting long golden streaks across the water, we remember the boy king, not for the power he held, but for the legacy he left. A legacy of rediscovery, of timeless splendor, and of the quiet magic that waits beneath the sands of history. And now, dear listener, the sands have settled. The golden mask rests once more behind glass. The tomb lies quiet beneath the cliffs, and the story of a boy king, brief, brilliant, and wrapped in mystery, has been told again under the soft glow of starlight. If you're still awake, you can now allow the soothing sounds to drift you gently off to sleep. Let your thoughts fade like mist across the plain, and let rest find you softly and slowly. Or if you're still full of quiet curiosity, why not journey onward through one of our other sleep-friendly stories? Each one waiting patiently in the shadows of history to be discovered again. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss any of our future journeys through time. Wherever you are, whether nestled beneath blankets in a quiet room, listening on a train under flickering lights, or lying beneath the same sky that once stretched over the Valley of the Kings. Thank you for sharing this hour with us. Until next time, sleep well.